Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Speedy. For those of you who are new here, it is time to review and wrap up my books for August. I am a little bit late in the game because I did go on vacation and I just got back, hence why it's a little bit late. So for August, I read all of these books right here, plus a book on my Kindle and one that I returned to the library. So a quick rundown of the statistics for August. I read a total of 11 books, 1 novella and 10 novels. 4 of them were young adult fantasies, 3 were regular fiction, and 4 were romance books. I read a total of 3,863 pages this month. So we started the month off with The Wicked King by Holly Black. This was the first book I read in August, and it feels like I've read this a long time ago, but it literally was just a month ago. I binged this book. This is the second book to the Folk of Air series, also known as the Cruel Prince series. Not too much of a summary because this is the second book. This follows Jude's journey after where the Cruel Prince left off, her trying to get as much power as she possibly can, being a human in a fairy world, and just trying to maneuver lives in politics and trying to understand her complicated relationship with Cardan. If you've read The Cruel Prince and you know where it left off, it was such a twist. It was so interesting what was happening, and honestly, this is one of my favorite books in general. Like, oh, this one's up there with Air of Fire. This one's up there with The Japanese Lover. I really like this book. I feel like there's a lot of character development between Cardan and June trying to understand herself and her role in this world. And there's just so much power play going on. It's just so interesting. And then the enemies to lovers is so good. Like, this is true, like, enemies to lovers. Like, it is cruel, it is confusing, it is mean, and it's great. I've mentioned this multiple times, but this fantasy series is just such a whimsical fantasy book that feels very different and refreshing compared to the fantasy books of right now. And even though yes, there is romance is not the main plot of the story. Romance is more of a subplot. This is definitely like a fantasy book. With that said, this is a 5 out of 5. My favorite book of the series, and very much a book that is high up there with something that I will go back and enjoy reading. Immediately after I put down The Wicked King, I picked up The Queen of Nothing. I think I started this right at midnight and I just started reading it. It was just The Wicked King left in such a big cliffhanger that I needed to read the third book, so I'm glad I bought it when I did. The Queen of Nothing, like I said, picks off from where The Wicked King left, and that did leave in a major cliffhanger. I am not going to elaborate more than that at this point. Just please read the series. It's such a good series. If you're not big on young adult books, which I tend to have a harder time reading young adult now that I'm no longer part of that audience, this is one of those books that is really good. It's very good writing, it's very original, and it's really good and refreshing. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep it as short as possible. I didn't think there would be any other way to go about the book. I didn't know how much more of a story there could be, and this book kind of proved me wrong, but it was still very much amazing to read. Very easy read. Really enjoyed the series overall. So this is going to be a 4.5 out of 5. Kind of quick side note, now that I'm done with the Cruel Prince series, I definitely recommend reading this series. It's one of my top favorites up there. I'm going to give the whole series as an overall rating of 5 out of 5. It's very different, very unique. It's very special to me. I really enjoyed myself. After finishing the Folk of Air series, I still wanted some young adult books. I still wanted to feel that angst, that teenage angst that reminded me so much of when I was in high school and stuff like that. And so I decided to read Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. I knew exactly what I was getting myself into when I picked up this book because I have heard Powerless being compared to Red Queen multiple times. I definitely knew what I was getting myself into, and yes, I'm not going to lie, they have very similar kind of plot lines. The Red Queen takes place in this world where our main character Mare lives in a divided world where people are either part of the red blood group or the silver blood group. The red bloods being the lowest of the low. They are the people they sent out to war, the people that are disposable to the silver bloods' eyes. The silver bloods are people who developed abilities abilities, so basically like superpowers, and are at the top of the hierarchy. Like I mentioned, being a red blood means that at 18 years old, if you do not have a job, you do not have an occupation, you're sent to this never-ending war. So eventually Mare meets this man at a tavern who grants her an occupation and brings her in to work at the royal palace. And then there she actually ends up finding out that she might have red blood, but she is a little bit silver as well. Finds out that she might have some abilities of her own, and because she did expose herself in front of a bunch of different silver bloods in order to protect her secret, the king and queen decided to say that she was a long lost silver, the daughter of a lord, and she just thought she was a red blood the whole time. And so then Mare is kind of pulled into this world of the silver blooded people, and she's just trying to kind of navigate that and figure out how she can help her people from the inside. So this is definitely very much like a dystopian young adult fantasy book. The plot twist did feel a little bit predictable, but it was still enjoyable. The romance aspect of it, I could care less. They could remove it completely and I wouldn't care, but I do know that there is a bit of a romance subplot in there, and it might be heavier in the future books, but at least in this book, I just really didn't care much for that. I was here more for the dystopian setting. Yeah, overall, this was a good read. It was a good book. Like I said, I knew what I was expecting. I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. Okay, so I'm restarting my Kindle. In the meantime, while I restart my Kindle, we'll talk about the next book I read, which was the novella, which is Queen's Song, and it's kind of like a prequel, should be read as a prequel, but came out later, I'm assuming, to Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. And this novella is all about the previous queen. It basically follows the story of how she captures the heart of the prince, because she did not go through a queen's trial like most other queens, and instead actually fell in love with the prince, and the prince fell in love with her. And we just learn about her backstory and kind of like her relationship with the prince, her relationship with Laura, which is the present queen from Red Queen. And it's a very small short novella. This is the cover, by the way. So overall, I think the story itself was powerful in the way it was told. However, I didn't think there was too much of a story. I feel like you kind of already knew everything because of how the Red Queen explained everything. So if anything, this just solidified some theories that either the characters had or you had yourself. But it didn't feel necessary to the plot. You could definitely go without reading it, basically. But I still liked it, and I did wish it was a little bit longer. I think if it was slightly a little bit longer, it might have been a lot more endearing, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word to use here. So I'm going to rate Queen's Song a 3 out of 5. So after that, I read the book that I got from the library, which is Expiration Dates by Rebecca Sorelli.
Still don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not.
This is actually one of the books I did for my reading vlogs, so you can kind of see more of my opinions and thoughts there. But to keep it short, basically, this book is about our main character, Daphne, who has been receiving notes with the person's name and a time frame since she was, I believe, a preteen or something like that. Basically, these notes would tell her who she was going to be dating and for how long she's going to be dating this person. And because of these notes, she felt like she couldn't really live a normal life, and it seemed like she had kind of trouble actually developing meaningful relationships. The story kicks off on a day that she receives a note with just the person's name, and there's no date. So she assumes that this just might be her soulmate. And it just follows the story of her trying to kind of navigate her life with this person and what this person means to her. And it is a time jump situation where you jump to the present timeline where it's her and her current relationship with Jake, who is the person she's supposed to spend the rest of her life with, and then previous relationships that she's had. So for this one, I almost gave it a 3.5 out of 5 because I wasn't a huge fan of Daphne.
She kind of annoyed me a little.
A lot of the times when the main characters annoy me a little, I tend to not have much of an enjoyable read. But after kind of sleeping on it, I felt like the message of the story and just overall the writing of the story, I loved the writing of the story, and the message of the story was beautiful, kind of like the whole you're in charge of your own destiny situation. I really did enjoy that part. And there is character development for Daphne at the very least. And then one of my favorite characters was Hugo in the story. So I really did enjoy the overall story and the message. I expected it to be a romance book, and it did have obviously like a romance subplot, but it was definitely more categorized as fiction, so that's why I categorized it as fiction. But it was a good book, and so I gave it a 4 out of 5. Almost gave it a 3.5 out of 5, but sleeping on it and just thinking about it, letting it simmer down, 4 out of 5. My camera's overheating, so give me a minute and I'll be right back. So I left off on 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This story follows Eva, who's a single mother and the author of a spicy paranormal romance series that picked up and became very popular when she was around 19. Her whole career as a Black author basically revolves around this series, and she's having difficulty breaking out of that series and just trying to write something else, trying to write something of her own. Our other character is Shane, who has been sober for 2 years and is having difficulty writing. So instead he's focusing on teaching and helping at-risk youth. So Eva and Shane met in high school and kind of bonded over their family situations. So the story kind of takes place back when they met in high school, and then them meeting once again 15 years later when Shane basically seeks out Eva. So it jumps back and forth. There's just this old flame from when they were in high school, and there's so much emotional drama. The writing is absolutely beautiful. There's just a lot going on with this book. Like from the first few sentences, I was hooked. This book has a good sense of comedic relief while still being a little bit melancholic and progressive all in one. The growth of these characters as they try to navigate being a Black author and what that means for them, and then just the growth between them when they were younger to 15 years later is just so much. The chemistry between the two was electric. There were times where I couldn't stop laughing. There were times where I would tear up, and it was just so emotional. It was such a good story. I recommended it to my friends, and I'm very picky about what I recommend to my friends. Absolutely loved this story, and possibly one of my favorite books of the year. So with that said, I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 5, and I really enjoyed myself, and this was my blind date with the book, so I'm very excited to kind of try those out more because it introduced me to such a great book. So I was definitely in the mood for some fiction. It was feeling very much like adult time. Like I just needed more of a fictional adult book. Not really romance, just wanted something else. And I was really interested in reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Let me tell you, this book was a roller coaster. So this starts off with childhood friends Sadie and Sam, who meet at the hospital because Sam is getting reconstructive surgery on his foot, and Sadie's there visiting her older sister who was going through chemo, I believe, at the time. Sadie and Sam end up developing this friendship and bonding over playing video games, eventually lose touch and meet again once Sadie and Sam are in their college years and get together to create a game. So the story basically follows Sam and Sadie from friends to collaborators through these messy and mixed feelings that they have. I didn't get to actually review this in my reading vlog, but when I first started this book, halfway through I had said, and I have a feeling this might be a 5-star. I might be talking too early, but yeah. And oh boy, did I jinx myself with that. This book, the first half, had me so tightly in its grasp. It was so good. I enjoyed every second of it, especially once we got to the part where it talks about their second video game, Both Sides, because it shows two different perspectives. I was just so into it up until that point. It kind of lost me. It really did. And the thing is that I felt that this book was gonna be so good because the characters were so humanly flawed, and then the writing was also very captivating and interesting and very inspiring too. Like it very much inspired me to like just create. But then on the second half, it kind of just lost its rhythm. It flowed so well the first half, and the second half just felt very anti-Sam when I felt like both of them had faults and blames of their own. And then out of nowhere, like this random drama kind of appears, and then we have NPC Marks, which low-key is the reason why they have a higher rating, because Marks, you're the NPC man. If you know, you know. I guess that overall there was just a huge lack of accountability like everywhere, and that might have been what really off-put me, even though I really enjoyed it because of how flawed it was. And it just felt choppy at points. It didn't flow as good. So the first half absolutely loved it, and for that reason it's at a higher rating. But the second half was just not for me, and I'm so sad because so many people love this book, but it was just not what I thought it was going to be, and I didn't even expect a happy ending or anything like that. It just did not flow. That was my main issue. So for that, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5.
Please don't hate me if you like this book.
So after that, I just needed something happy. I needed something light, something easy to read. I picked up a novel love story by Ashley Poston. This is my second book by Ashley Poston, and the first one was a 5 out of 5 for me. So because of that, I did have higher expectations for this, but I did try to kind of like reel myself in. So this book follows our main character, Elsie, who is on her way on this book club retreat, which no one else is going, by the way. It's only her because everyone else had things coming up, and she was just at a very difficult point of her life, so she did not want to cancel the retreat and decided to just go by herself. The problem was, while she was driving to this area, there was this storm that kind of just kicked in and her car was kind of malfunctioning, so she pulled over in this small town where her car finally decided to give up and break down fully. Later on, we find out that this small town is Elorton, which is actually the exact same town from her favorite small town romance books. So this is a book lover's dream, basically ending up in your favorite book, and that's what happened to Elsie. She was able to meet all her favorite characters, live in this small town that she knows by heart because she's read the books so many times and they are her comfort story, and they're exactly the way that they were left in the last book, because unfortunately the series was never finished because the author passed away. And so she decides, the reason I'm here, the reason why I ended up in this place, is to help these characters reach their happily ever after, including our very own grumpy bookstore owner guy whose name is Anders. It was very cute, very fluffy, and surprisingly very serious at times, because I noticed that for Ashley Poston, she tends to have themes of death and grief, and that still touched on it here. It was a really good story. I really enjoyed myself. Like I said, a book lover's dream. It was very cute. I ended up giving this book a 4 out of 5.
My camera wants to die again because it's overheating.
We're gonna see if we can do a speed round. The book I read after that was Famine by Laura Thalassa, and this is the third book in the Four Horsemen series. This is a dark romance, so look for the triggers in this book. This story follows our main character Anna in Brazil. The third horseman shows up, which is Famine, also known as the Reaper. Anna actually has some history with Famine because it turns out she met him once before, and 5 years later she's meeting him again. So this is the story between Anna and Famine and kind of just their relationship, their struggles, and whatnot. I have been saying that you could read these as standalones, but you definitely cannot read this book and the next book as standalones. So actually, please start with the first book. The first two definitely felt more like standalones, but this one actually ends in a cliffhanger, which means that the fourth book is going to be very heavily reliant on the rest of the series. For spicy levels, this one was spicy, not as spicy as the rest in my opinion, so I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. As for all, my overall rating for this one, I think I'm going to say a 3.5 out of 5. It was good. I enjoyed myself. Nothing spectacular stood out about it. In fact, I almost forgot that I read this month, but I still enjoyed myself. I was looking for a dark romance book, and this kind of fit the bill without it being overly dark. And so then after that, I went on vacation, and on my vacation I started reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and this has been on my TBR for I think almost a year now at this point, and I finally got around to getting a copy and reading it. This very much has that storytelling feeling of someone just telling you a story about their life, because this story is about Evelyn Hugo, who reaches out to Monique Grant and asks Monique to actually write her biography. Follows the story of Evelyn Hugo and everything she did to attain the fame and fortune that she has. It is scandalous, it is drama, it is Hollywood, it is everything you could think of when it comes to Hollywood drama, and it is so good. It talks about the struggles of sexuality and what it means to be a woman in the Hollywood world, and what she had to do and what she was willing to offer and give up of herself.
She overheated again.
But we're so close to finishing this book review, so we're gonna go through it really fast. But yeah, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was such a great read. It was so refreshing and such a good summer vacation read too. Like, this was the perfect vacation book. I would read it by the beach, by the pool. It got wet at some point and I got so devastated, which is why it looks more worn out than the rest of my books. But oh, I loved this story. I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. Last but not least, I read Reckless by Elsie Silver. This is the 4th book in the Chestnut Spring series. I was very hesitant about putting it in my August reading wrap-up because technically I finished it in September, but I started it in August. I'm just doing my book review. I decided to just add it in there. This is actually about Winter, who is finally divorcing her husband and is trying to mend her relationship with Summer. And then Theo happens to see Winter for the first time. They kind of have this like insta-lusty, insta-lovey attraction. The day they meet, there's this huge storm going on and Winter's ready to leave the house and Theo offers basically to give her a ride back to the hotel. Winter declines, and so Theo at least offers to drive behind her so he can make sure that she gets back to the hotel safe. Winter agrees. So then by the time they get to the hotel, Winter's grateful for his help and invites him for a few drinks at the hotel. One thing leads to another. There's obvious chemistry between the two and they end up having a one-night stand, which is a fade to black kind of situation, which I'm grateful because I'm not a huge fan of spicy scenes at the beginning of the book. I feel like it kind of ruins the tension, in my opinion. This is a pregnancy trope a little bit after Winter realizes she's pregnant, which for her is a good thing because before her divorce, she really just wanted to be a mother. All she wanted was to have a child. Seeing that she was pregnant, even if it was not in the circumstances that she wished it were, she was really happy about it. It basically follows Winter and her relationship with Theo and now with this child. And like I mentioned, it's a pregnancy trope. I know some of you out there do not like that, so just keep that in mind because I just knew this was the 4th book and I was going to read it, but I did not know it was a pregnancy trope until I read the back and I'm just like, oh yeah, I probably should have been more prepared for that. I don't hate the pregnancy trope, but I don't like absolutely love it either. I just don't care for it. Like, I don't care. It just really did kind of like take me a moment to be like, oh okay, we're going this route. It was your cute typical Elsie Silver book. However, this felt very removed from the rest of the series, which I don't know if it was done on purpose because overall Winter feels removed from the Ethan family and the ranch and like everything. She just feels like an outsider, and this book very much feels like that too. Like, it's just very removed. I remember when I first saw what this book was about, I thought it was going to be about Bo. I did not think it was going to be about Winter because there's no direct relationship into the Ethan family. Theo is just a mentee and Summer is marrying into the family. So like, this is the first book where there's no actual blood relationship to the Ethan family. So that kind of surprised me a little. Yeah, so this book definitely felt very much removed.
Oh my god, my throat feels dry.
It could have been just any other romance book, not necessarily had to be part of the series. I enjoyed myself, but it definitely wasn't my favorite. So overall, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5. These were all the books I've read. 11 books this month, a few 5 stars in there. Love it when that happens, don't we all? I had such a hard time picking my books for the next month, so you'll be able to see that in my bookish vlog that will come out after this. But I really did have a hard time. We're in that weird transition between summer and fall where you just want it to be fall already, but the weather's really hot. We're going into a really hot heat wave pretty soon here too. Everything fall is out, but it's still really hot. But thank you all so much for watching. If you read any of these books, please let me know down in the comments below what you think about them. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. It's been so long since I've mentioned this, but I would really appreciate it if y'all did. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a beautiful day and I will see y'all next time. Bye!